esta problemática sin ser miembros del campus universitario y sin usurpar, por lo tanto, las funciones que tienen los rectores en ese sentido, pero que creo que he tratado de identificar algunas de estas medidas de actuación.
Pero es una agenda, yo creo que coincidimos en los puntos claves de esa agenda, que posiblemente es común además a distintas regiones del mundo: financiación, gobernanza, desregulación o más autonomía para las universidades, la necesidad de conectar el entorno profesional y el mundo de la empresa con la universidad. Yo creo que son principios que deberían marcar la agenda de la política educativa de muchos gobiernos y también de la iniciativa de las universidades. Pablo, en Uniandes habéis ensayado nuevas fórmulas precisamente de financiación para intentar atraer a un público más diverso de estudiantes, de alumnos, que una política más inclusiva. Es en ese sentido un sistema de financiación relativamente innovador. Se están ensayando distintas fórmulas en otros países, pero me gustaría que tú compartieras con nosotros esta iniciativa para ver si es replicable en otros lugares con éxito.
Gracias, Santiago. Primero, mi gusto de estar aquí en la madre patria. Muchas gracias. Definitivamente en Latinoamérica hay mucha diversidad, y no solo entre países, sino dentro de los mismos países. En las distintas regiones de Colombia hay mucha diversidad. Y oyendo a Matías, sin duda, cuando vas a las buenas universidades, la problemática es la misma. Pero un poco en la línea de lo que dijo Rebeca, parte del problema, y creo hablar en todos los países latinoamericanos, es que hay muy buenas universidades privadas y muy malas universidades privadas, y muy buenas universidades públicas y muy malas universidades públicas. Entonces también uno entiende a veces a los gobiernos en su afán regulatorio, porque como pasa siempre, la regulación va a tratar de controlar excesos en las malas, quitándole la libertad y la autonomía a las buenas que están buscando calidad. Gracias, Santiago, por darme esta oportunidad, porque le comentaba que tal vez de lo más disruptivo, diría, que ha pasado en la universidad fue un mecanismo que hemos ensayado apenas 6 años, y todo en la educación es a largo plazo, o sea que resultados nos tocará verlo, pero los indicadores hasta ahora han sido maravillosos. Es que consideramos que préstamo contingente a ingresos, es decir, es una función de cuánto gane la persona apenas sale a trabajar, y lo más importante es 2 elementos. Uno, que el documento que firma no es un documento que sea legalmente obligatorio, sino es un compromiso moral. De hecho, lo llamamos un acuerdo de reciprocidad. Y el otro concepto es que el que maneja el fondo son ellos mismos, los estudiantes. Entonces, el estudiante no sale con ninguna deuda con la institución, sino con el grupo. Y todo el concepto detrás es que adquiere una obligación contingente a su ingreso para que la siguiente cohorte o la siguiente generación pueda tener las mismas oportunidades que él tuvo. Va un poco en contra de la gratuidad de la educación superior, va más en decir, hay una época en donde hay una iliquidez que hay que subsanar. De hecho, la frase que hemos acuñado es que hoy consideramos a los estudiantes no un estudiante pobre, sino un estudiante temporalmente ilíquido, porque estimamos y esperamos que cuando salga de la universidad ya esté en capacidad no solo de dejar su pobreza, sino de poder contribuir a las nuevas generaciones.
Es una fórmula muy parecida a la de las universidades americanas, norteamericanas, en términos del fundraising, el pedir a sus alumnos el giving back, ¿no? El que devuelvan un poco lo que han recibido en términos de formación. Voy a hacer una pregunta a Rebeca, porque si no se nos va a ir sin que solamente haya intervenido una vez. ¿Qué cambios piensas, Rebeca, que habría que implementar desde un punto de vista más macro para impulsar en América Latina pues todo lo que es la digitalización también en el entorno universitario? Antes el presidente de Telefónica ponía una transparencia en la cual se veía que el 88% de los profesores, por ejemplo, no conocen o no han tenido la experiencia de enseñar, por ejemplo, con el uso de tecnologías, de enseñar online. Yo recordaba otra estadística en la cual el 90% de los profesores que han experimentado algún tipo de tecnología online son muy partidarios y se vuelven adeptos de este tipo de implementación de las tecnologías en el proceso de enseñanza. Pero ¿qué cambios piensas que harían falta en América Latina para impulsar mucho más la incorporación de la tecnología, las habilidades digitales, la empleabilidad de la que antes hablábamos?
Sí, hay un dato que a mí me parece muy revelador, ¿no? Y es que en América Latina la digitalización ha entrado en el ocio, pero no en la educación y el trabajo. O sea, hay una gran penetración de Facebook y de Twitter en el uso de la población en la región. Un ejemplo es que Brasil tiene 100 millones de usuarios en Facebook, más que el mundo entero en LinkedIn, por ejemplo, ¿no? Pero eso no se ha traducido ni en la matriz productiva ni en la matriz educativa de la misma manera. O sea, ha habido una penetración de la educación para el uso de las redes, pero no para poder ponerlas al servicio de la diversificación productiva y de la calidad educativa. Y yo creo que ahí, bueno, también hay mucha diversidad dependiendo de las universidades, tal como lo decía Pablo muy bien, pero lo cierto es que el esfuerzo del gobierno tiene que ser, en términos de políticas públicas, tiene que ser mucho más dirigido y tiene que ser mucho más dialogante. O sea, yo que estuve en el gobierno tengo que decir que la conversación del gobierno con la sociedad tiene que cambiar, ¿no? Y ahí tenemos un problema porque, como sucede muchas veces cuando las sociedades están sumergidas en cambios muy acelerados, no todo cambia al mismo tiempo. Y yo creo que en América Latina, en parte lo que ha pasado es que la sociedad ha ido más rápido que las instituciones. A las instituciones les cuesta cambiar. Hay un rezago institucional y parte de la pregunta es cómo abrimos las instituciones. Así como hablamos de innovación abierta en el sector privado, hay que hablar de innovación abierta también en las instituciones de la sociedad, ¿no? Para que puedan cambiar de una manera más acelerada. Y si me permites, porque desgraciadamente, y me disculpa, me tengo que ir, yo quiero tomar una cosa que ha dicho Pablo y una cosa que ha dicho Matías también, y decir que nosotros creemos en la internacionalización de las universidades, de la educación, creemos en su diversidad y en la internacionalización. En los datos que yo les di antes, cuando les dije que 2 de cada 3 estudiantes en América Latina seguían siendo primera generación en su familia que llega a la universidad, hay 2 datos que quiero darles al mismo tiempo. Uno es que la mayoría de esos estudiantes no tienen pasaporte, más del 50%. Nunca han salido de su país. Y el segundo dato que tengo que darles es que así como duplicamos, cierto, la población universitaria, tenemos un trofeo en América Latina que no quisiéramos, y es que tenemos la tasa de deserción universitaria más alta del mundo. Y estas cosas no son cosas que no están articuladas. Lo que pasa es que los muchachos al final no sienten que van a tener un mejor empleo por terminar la universidad. Y si no les damos esa capacidad, esa motivación de seguir aprendiendo y esa motivación además de internacionalizarse, que les da las habilidades blandas que da el Erasmus europeo, porque en el Erasmus europeo lo que se aprende no se aprende en el aula, se aprende en la experiencia, se aprende en la calle. Los muchachos que fueron al Erasmus tienen mucha menos desempleo y muchos mejores trabajos. ¿Cómo darle a esos 2 de cada 3 estudiantes primera generación en su familia que llega a la universidad la misma oportunidad que el otro tercio de los estudiantes se convierte en un elemento fundamental? Y por eso, aprendiendo de Santander Universidades, nosotros hemos planteado la posibilidad de financiar un Erasmus iberoamericano que llamamos Campus Iberoamérica, con el mismo concepto que la Universidad de las Andes está tratando de impulsar. El hecho de que cuando tengas entonces un mejor empleo, puedas devolverle a la comunidad para que también otra persona pueda hacer esa experiencia que te dimos la oportunidad a ti que tuvieras. Ojalá que podamos hacerlo con el sector privado, que es a quien estamos acudiendo para hacerlo, porque desgraciadamente, mi querido Matías, en este momento, como dicen ahora en bonito, el espacio fiscal en América Latina es muy reducido y por lo tanto va a ser muy difícil que podamos aumentar los presupuestos educativos para este propósito. Deben aumentar para muchos otros, pero para este propósito será muy difícil. Yo creo que aquí el sector privado tiene que venir en nuestra ayuda para nivelar las oportunidades y para tener efectivamente a los jóvenes que puedan trabajar en ambientes diversos, multiculturales, en equipos, que puedan unir el lado derecho e izquierdo del cerebro, que es lo que necesita la nueva economía, donde tengan capacidad analítica, pero también las habilidades blandas y creativas que el mercado de trabajo demanda. Ojalá que podamos hacer eso por la equidad y por la educación en América Latina. Muchas gracias
Rebeca.
y me disculpan.
Muchas gracias, Rebeca. Muy bien, voy a continuar con un tema que antes mencionaba Matías en el anuncio de la agenda, ¿no?, de transformación en la universidad, y que también ha comentado Pablo, que tiene que ver con la regulación, porque efectivamente la educación es un bien común. Parece que existe pues una obligación de por lo menos supervisar la calidad del tipo de servicio que se presta, pero también la tensión se produce entre autonomía e innovación y esa supervisión de la calidad, como sucede en otros sectores de negocio, de actividad, en otros sectores sociales. Yo pienso, por ejemplo, en Reino Unido, donde la acreditación y la supervisión es más de carácter institucional, pero no se limita tanto lo que es el control en el lanzamiento de nuevos programas o nuevas ofertas o nuevos grados, nuevas licenciaturas, ¿no? No sé hasta qué punto se puede resolver esa tensión que existe en cualquier entorno y que muchas veces limita la innovación, la proximidad de las universidades a las necesidades del entorno, de las empresas, de las instituciones, y hace que los programas muchas veces estén obsoletos, que algunos grados pues realmente no sean empleables, ¿no?, por parte del mercado. Pero me pregunto cuál es vuestra opinión acerca de esto, un poco por profundizar en un problema que también es muy presente en América Latina.
Estamos viviendo una etapa disruptiva de cambio aceleradísimo y no había más que asistir a las sesiones de esta mañana para darnos cuenta de manera tan gráfica y tan elocuente del cambio que está experimentando la sociedad, para ignorar que hay que dejar mucha más libertad, mucha más flexibilidad para adaptarse a este cambio. Es decir, tratar de regular un cambio tan vertiginoso, a mi modo de ver, es una tarea inútil. Hay que exigir transparencia cuando se utilizan recursos públicos y, naturalmente, controles ex post para ver que realmente los fondos que se hayan podido utilizar se han utilizado de manera razonable. Pero esa excesiva regulación, esa hiperregulación en títulos, en capacidades que se exigen a los profesores para dictar cursos en la universidad, que se dice a veces de manera anecdótica que en la Universidad Española algún premio Nobel no hubiera tenido posibilidad de enseñar por el número de regulaciones que se exigen. Yo creo que todo eso hay que superarlo. Yo creo que
profesores de Harvard,
sí,
también profesores de Harvard no tendrían en ocasiones la convalidación adecuada del sistema, en ocasiones es muy burocrático.
Y luego porque el sistema hiperregulado actual no ha evitado cuestiones como, por ejemplo, que el 20% de los titulados españoles estén subempleados, lo cual es un despilfarro enorme de recursos en la sociedad. El que una persona haya tenido un título universitario y luego tenga que subemplearse con ese título, denota que hay una falta de adecuación, oferta-demanda, por una falta de flexibilidad de adaptarse a ese mercado laboral. O lo que hemos visto aquí, que es una cosa ya muy conocida, no solamente la disparidad en las disciplinas STEM entre la mujer y el hombre en el acceso a estas disciplinas, sino también en las disciplinas STEM en su conjunto, tanto de hombres y mujeres, la baja participación en algunos países en relación con otros, denota que no tenemos rapidez para adaptarnos a ese entorno. Por eso también los sistemas de gobernanza hay que controlarlos para que, en definitiva, la universidad sea más sensible a lo que está sucediendo fuera de la propia universidad y no es extraordinariamente sensible a lo que sucede dentro de la universidad. Es decir, que si un rector se elige por el claustro universitario y por el PAS y por los alumnos, naturalmente vive para, en definitiva, conformarse a necesidades. Y está a veces a espaldas de la propia sociedad. Y la empresa, que aquí se ha mencionado, lo ha mencionado Rebeca, pues tiene también una responsabilidad en esto. Es decir, que el peso de la investigación recaiga en algunos países en más del 70% en la universidad, en el sector público, que denota que la empresa no está haciendo en aspectos también que tienen que ver con la investigación lo que tiene que hacer. Y luego la relación, que yo insisto muchísimo en ese punto, porque estando en un banco y viendo la relación que tiene un banco con las empresas y teniendo a nuestra vez esa relación con las universidades, estamos haciendo un esfuerzo para conectar universidad y empresa, para que dialoguen mejor, para que en definitiva, pues desde el punto de vista de la investigación, esa se haga en relación con las necesidades de la empresa y también desde el punto de vista de los titulados que tengan esa sensibilidad a lo que requiere la sociedad y evitar esa especie de, que antes mencionaba, de mal uso de los recursos y no tener, en definitiva, los profesionales que la sociedad demanda. Hay también en el tema de los grados que se ha mencionado aquí, pues un reto para la propia universidad, que es conciliar esa educación más técnica, más digital que se requiere en los tiempos, pero manteniendo determinados conceptos transversales y que van a ser siempre válidos en el futuro. Es decir, formar personas capaces de trabajar en equipo, con integridad, con ética, con capacidades de liderazgo, con capacidades de comunicación, idiomas, movilidad internacional. Todo ese tipo de cuestiones es un reto para la universidad, cómo adaptarse a un tiempo tan cambiante y asimilar ese tipo de enseñanzas que hoy requiere la sociedad.
Pablo, el tema regulatorio en Colombia, porque es muy diverso a través de América Latina, ¿no? Yo conozco sistemas como el brasileiro, ¿no?, donde la regulación es extrema en términos de los contenidos, las denominaciones, y luego ya el grado de regulación en distintos países cambia. Pero tú antes hablabas de la importancia de supervisar la calidad. ¿Cómo compaginarías ese derecho de autonomía, pero también la necesidad de innovar con la necesidad de supervisar calidad?
Sí, yo creo que nuestros ministerios tienen un reto grande, porque los cambios tan rápidos que tenemos que enfrentar las universidades claramente no están compaginados con las demoras burocráticas de obtener los permisos para los distintos nuevos programas. Ayer hablábamos con el rector Bradford que puede tomarse 2 o 3 años en aprobar un programa. ¿Cuánto le cuesta eso a la sociedad, al país? Un programa que ha sido planeado, listo, en donde están los estudiantes dispuestos a entrar, pero no existe la aprobación oficial. Por otro lado, el reto es que hay universidades que evidentemente ante esta necesidad de una sociedad creciente y progresando de tener un título universitario, se abren universidades, en Colombia las llamamos universidades de garaje, que es aquellas universidades que se conforman rápidamente. Entonces, hasta cierto punto hay un engaño detrás de lo que ofrecen esas universidades al estudiante. Y un tema en la educación que todos sabemos es que en la mayoría de los servicios uno puede, digamos, el usuario puede detectar la calidad. En la salud es evidente, en los servicios públicos es evidente. En la educación a veces se toma muchos años a saber si lo que uno recibió en el colegio o en la universidad efectivamente era bueno. Entonces uno también ve la necesidad de tener que, entre comillas, proteger una población muy necesitada de tener títulos universitarios para progresar laboralmente. En ese sentido los retos son enormes y de golpe quisiera tocar de lo que decías al final, Matías. Fíjate, Santiago, que es que nosotros como universidad, una bonita forma de ponerlo es que nos toca balancear lo pertinente con lo impertinente. Porque ¿dónde más se hace eso? ¿Sí? Esa impertinencia de lo que aparentemente no es útil la semana entrante o el año entrante o va a ser medido en el empleo, pero que probablemente va a ser útil durante toda la vida y claramente es un elemento cohesivo como sociedad. Y aún impertinencia de decir algo que el gobierno de turno no quiera decir, no quiera oír, no en base a una posición política o ideológica, sino en base al resultado de un análisis académico o una investigación. Y en países como Latinoamérica eso sí que es necesario, donde, pues no solo en Latinoamérica, ¿sí? Pero hay unos cambios ideológicos tan grandes cada 4 años, en donde las visiones de lo que es la educación, todos dicen que es importante, pero cambian todo. Entonces, esa falta de continuidad a veces tiene unos impactos grandes que yo creo que la universidad tiene que ayudar a solucionar.
Comparto tu punto de vista acerca del estudiante no como consumidor o cliente, ¿no? Y recuerdo de hecho que el post en LinkedIn en el que he tenido más tráfico por encima de las 300.000 visualizaciones fue precisamente sobre el estudiante no es cliente, ¿no? Ni siquiera yo creo, es duro decir esto, pero quizá en la salud de sujeto-paciente, en el caso de los estudios, es materia prima, ¿no? Que vamos transformando. Sé que esto suena duro porque vivimos en una cultura muy consumerista, pero tienes razón que los resultados de la educación solo se perciben en el largo plazo, ¿no? Una última pregunta, porque estamos ya rozando el tiempo límite, que tiene que ver con propuestas de integración regional. Al final en Europa el programa Erasmus yo creo que ha sido mucho más importante para la integración del continente que el propio euro. ¿Qué podría hacerse en América Latina? Y yo sé que, por ejemplo, Santander Universidades organiza muchísimas iniciativas, también vuestra universidad ha creado un consorcio, pero me sorprende muchas veces ver los bajos números de estudiantes de América Latina que aplican a universidades del continente. Suelen ser mucho más altos para estudiar en Estados Unidos o en Europa, cosa que, por ejemplo, no sucede dentro de Europa, ¿no? Pero ¿qué iniciativas podrían promoverse para generar mucho más movimiento de talento cross-border, ¿no? A través de los países de América Latina?
Bueno, yo creo que aquí hay dos posibles iniciativas. De nuevo, y me excuso por referirme tanto a las trabas administrativas, pero creo que muchas veces la falta de reconocimiento de títulos mutuos, la falta de la excesiva burocracia para que una persona pueda trasladarse a otro país, integrarse. En fin, hay elementos que hay que eliminar dentro de este proceso que es en sí muy complejo. Hay que estimularlo y los programas Erasmus y sus becas demuestran que hay que dotar también de recursos, hay que becar. Y tenemos tanto en España las becas Carolina, las que de la Fundación Carolina, que promueven precisamente la movilidad de futuros líderes de Latinoamérica. Yo asistí hace muy poco a una reunión con estos becarios Carolina, que verdaderamente hay un talento extraordinario. Los 40 becados habían pasado un proceso de selección que se había iniciado con 4.000 postulantes. Eso hay que extenderlo, es decir, hay un talento enorme, deseoso de movilidad, de aprender de otras culturas, y entonces, de nuevo hay que dedicar recursos, hay que eliminar burocracia, y me parece que es la misma receta que digo siempre, pero es necesario avanzar en esa dirección. Y si me permiten, hago una pequeña, no puntualización, sino matiz a lo que decía el rector Navas. Yo creo que, volviendo otra vez al tema de los controles, yo creo que el mercado tiene una enorme sensibilidad para conocer cuáles son las buenas universidades. Es decir, las empresas no necesitan muchos elementos para enseguida identificar de dónde proceden los mejores posibles personas para esa empresa. De tal manera que yo creo que el mercado, hay que tener confianza en que el mercado al final es capaz de analizar dónde está el talento, y de dónde son las universidades que dan el mejor talento. De tal manera que yo creo que hay esa combinación entre transparencia por un lado y después la disciplina de mercado pues creo que nos permite tener más confianza cuando dejemos ese proceso de libertad y de flexibilidad, de autonomía a las universidades. Yo creo que estás absolutamente, rector, de acuerdo con lo que digo, pero quería introducir este pequeño elemento que tú conoces bien, porque tú eres el rector de una universidad de gran calidad, cuyos egresados están muy demandados por el mercado en Colombia. Por lo tanto, conoces que ya, sin necesidad de esos controles, ya la enseñanza de la Universidad de los Andes es muy apreciada.
Rector, tenemos 30 segundos para una última intervención tuya.
Que deberíamos llevar a Matías de asesor de nuestro ministro. No, tal vez en un minuto hemos hecho una alianza con la Universidad Católica de Chile y el TEC de Monterrey basado en confianza, en donde partimos de la base de quitar todas las trabas. En los Andes ya estamos dictando cursos del TEC y obviamente abrir a que haya total integración entre las tres universidades. Te anotaba, Santiago, en los últimos 10 segundos que esa relación muy directa con nombre propio ayuda y es complementaria a las redes, pero es distinto que una red. Entonces, yo creo que cuando nosotros en Latinoamérica también nos miremos que necesitamos que haya interacción entre Latinoamérica, no es solo ir a Estados Unidos o venir a Europa, sino hay grandes recursos muy importantes dentro de la misma continente que puede ser utilizado colaborando unos con los otros.
Muchas gracias, Pablo, muchas gracias, Matías, y por favor un aplauso a los ponentes del panel.
Bueno, y muchas gracias, por favor, un minuto, por favor. Muchas gracias, por supuesto, a Santiago Íñiguez, presidente de IE University, que además estará firmando su libro, voy a hacer cuña aquí, creo que no me equivoco, uno de sus libros a la salida a la 1. ¿Es así, Santiago? A la 1, Santiago Íñiguez firmará sus libros, así que será un placer no solo verte, pero leerlo. Muchas gracias a los tres. Adelante. Thank you very much. Guys, haven't we rehearsed this, Javier? I thought we rehearsed this. Javier, we rehearsed this in advance.
All right.
Believe it or not,
My apologies.
We have rehearsed this and we said who comes after and before, and they've been completely disobedient and they've done whatever they wanted. Okay, well, there you are, our next panel. They're already ready. We're going to talk about reinventing legal education in the era of tech revolution. I was telling our panelists in the backstage, I'm a lawyer by profession, and it seems that law has changed very little, at least in terms of education, to adapt to the new technologies and to adapt to globalization. There's a big gap between what we study, the law studies, and what the world needs. So that's what they hear. They know that it's vital to reinvent legal education to bridge this gap. So we have a panel of lawyers. Be careful, guys. You know, lawyers in the room. Let me introduce them. We have our super moderator is no one else than the Dean of IE Law School. He's Javier de Cendra on your far left. Then we have the Secretary General, International Bar Association and partner of Gómez Acebo y Pombo. She's Almudena Arpón de Mendívil. We have the Dean of the Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México, es Jorge Cerdio. And we have the President of Law School Global Lead, Gonzalo Matías. Despite all speaking Spanish, they will conduct, I believe, this panel in English. Is that right? Now I'll ask a round of applause for our panel of lawyers. Thank you. All yours, Javier.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for being here with us. And in this panel, we are going to discuss the challenges that face legal education and the legal professions. And I'm going to start off by being quite provocative so that we can quickly get into the real profound challenges that legal education is facing throughout the world and get also a bit of time to think about how to start addressing them. So I'm going to take a few minutes to elaborate some arguments. Please bear with me. And what I'm going to do, for starters, is to come back to 2010 and reflect a little bit on the deep crisis that legal education has experienced in the United States of America. None of my colleagues come from the USA, so we can be safe about using that example and being trenchant about the USA. So 7 years ago, some very well experienced, very sharp lawyers in the USA decided to start filing lawsuits against law schools representing thousands, tens of thousands of students that felt cheated by the law schools. Why was that? Well, because they had been sold a future in terms of jobs and payment in those jobs that was unreal. Law schools had been promising students that upon graduation they will get fantastic salaries in the legal industry. Of course, that was not going to be the case. What did law schools do to lure students into the classrooms? Well, they inflated placement rates, for starters. They said that the percentage of law graduates that would go into lucrative legal professions would be much higher than it actually was. How did they do it? For instance, they hired their own students and they were saying to the market that those were in the legal profession making more money. Or they placed students in non-legal professions making little money and saying that they were actually in the legal profession making much more money. This was embellishment, a fraud and the consumer law protections. So the class actions went all the way to courts and to juries, and the real thing is that most cases they lost. Students lost. Why did they lose? Because the judges and the juries said that law students are sophisticated enough to understand that law schools cannot promise a job. Now, what was their argument? That they had become heavily indebted, sometimes paying more than 300,000 euros in tuition fees, and they found themselves without a job to pay back those loans, so they had important difficulties to develop their own life. One of the deans of the schools that got sued by the citizens, upon being relieved of the lawsuit, said, "I am really happy because the jury has confirmed that my school is very committed with an education that guarantees students the knowledge, abilities, and tools necessary to succeed in the legal profession." Now, all this has had very important impacts on legal education in the USA. The number of students going into law schools, even the most prestigious ones, has gone down dramatically. Now, let me broaden now a little bit the framework in which these lawsuits took place. 2010, the midst of the global financial and economic crisis, many students that did not have a vocation to practice law went into law schools because they thought, we will have to pay a lot of money, but we will get very lucrative jobs. And law schools, knowing this, did two interesting things. One, to raise tuition fees to make more money. Second, to lower admission standards, to get in essentially anyone that wanted to study in their schools. Now, if this is the case, one would imagine, and this is what the literature has said, it has drawn two conclusions from this story, this little story about the class actions. First, once the global financial and economic crisis is finished, is over, law schools will come back to normal, and the legal industry will come back to normal. And also, the legal industry is being reorganized in such a way that is using technology massively to reduce the costs and to deliver more efficiently its services. And the law school graduates, were not ready to embrace technology, the technological disruption in the legal industry, because law schools were outdated. Now, this is correct, and the crisis has receded a little bit. But I want to suggest a deeper lesson from this story. Law schools, in my view, have fallen into a mercantilization problem, meaning they have forgotten what it means to be a lawyer, what it means to train lawyers. What is lawyer? It comes from advocatus, abogado in Spanish, avocato in Italian. Lawyers are those called to help others defending their legitimate cases through law. is a vocation. And there is no vocation to power, to prestige, or wealth. Those things are nice. They don't need to happen to be a happy lawyer. But many law schools have put vocation for sale. And many law school students have gone into law schools without a vocation to practice law because they thought law schools would give them a passport to wealth, power, and prestige. And when vocations are put up for sale, we can imagine the consequences. Lawyers very often pursuing power, wealth, by charging too many billing hours to their clients, finding contractual ways to extract too much rent from their clients' customers, exploiting young associates until they fall into despair, and generally bending legal rules of the legal system to their advantage. Some professors in the USA have gone as far as to say that the entire USA legal system is being manipulated to foster private ends. I'm going to come to my conclusions and then we start with the questions. First, legal education in the USA is still under this mercantilization trap. Second, law schools, if they want to get out of it, need to recover the idea of law as a vocation and spark in their students a love for the law and select those students that are really committed to promote the common good through the law. Third, they need to think deeply about the meaning of legal systems and the goals of legal systems and those that serve the legal systems. Last but not least, they need to adapt very quickly to serve the legal industry that is being transformed dramatically by technology and to enable serving many people that so far have been underserved by the legal system because of very high costs. So, we need to undertake a revolution in legal education, and that requires training lawyers that are technologically proficient, but also that recover the humanist approach to the law, recover the true vocation about the law. So what do you think about this? And what are the contours of the crisis in legal education, if there is indeed one, in other jurisdictions? Because this panel is about global legal education, not just the USA. Jorge.
Yes. I would say that you have described the perfect storm for not being an innovator in the US. Not only because they were assuring students a place in the legal services market, well-paid place, but also because law schools were happy and content with that. That is, they didn't innovate a single change in the traditional curricula. For example, the 1L, the first year of law schools in most US law schools has been untouched for the past 50 years or so. So they were placed in a position where they were not having the adequate incentives to innovate. So that said, for the US, I think pretty much spreads across Latin America. That is where Latin America top law schools provides somehow a mobility space for most law students that apply to a law school. So law schools are not incentivized to innovate in their curricula because they already are recognized by the markets. And I would say they translate or they move on the cost of not being innovators to law firms largely, where law firms has to take up young students, young graduates, who are not proficiently enough to engage into the new challenges of the legal profession, and yet the universities do not acknowledge that that's a cost that they are translated into legal firms. So I would say that much of what you have just depicted for the US applies for top schools in Latin America. I would say that this presents an opportunity to look at the other way around. That is, if we continue law schools not to innovate into a curricula and to acknowledge that we have to add value in face of complexities in the legal profession, then we are going to face with mobility into different other fields. For example, we have seen at least in Mexico, but this is also true, I know, of Colombia and Chile and Argentina, that prospective students have switched from law to political science or economics. And that's it not so much because of the social mobility, but because they are just not enthusiastic enough as to how prominent the future is in the legal profession. They already seen that the legal trends in the salaries are coming down throughout Latin America. So I would say, to sum up, much of what you have just described is a position where the innovation does not come because they have been selling a product to the legal services market that is fair enough, has to be acknowledged as a product that gets well-paid salaries eventually. Plus, law schools have been conservative enough not to acknowledge how they are not training legal professionals well enough in the legal services market and translating these costs into law firms, basically. So I would say the crisis pretty much resembles what we have seen in Latin America.
Thank you very much. So, Gonzalo, as president of the Law Schools Global League, representing many top law schools all over the world, how do you think about other jurisdictions or indeed the global level? Is this crisis of legal education present everywhere and perhaps differently? What do you think about that?
Well, I think the crisis is really global, but I would prefer to put it as challenges more than crisis. And I would point basically 3 issues that I think contribute to that crisis or are the major challenges of legal education and legal practice today. And maybe we then have some time to discuss some of them. So I would say the first one is globalization. It's a huge challenge for legal education and legal practice because law, legal education and legal practice in the past used to be parochial. So we have a very parochial idea of law as something that is national, that is particular of each state. It used to, when we have discussions with friends, it used to be, well, you're a lawyer, you can only practice in your own country. You cannot do it globally. Well, that is not true anymore. So, and we know that, and at the Law Schools Global League, we foster that. So that's a clear idea that globalization is changing the practice of law. So we can no longer train lawyers in our law schools as if law was a parochial practice or a parochial science. That's the challenge of globalization. Second challenge is technology, because, and I hope we can further that a little bit, but just in a sentence. Also, we used to train lawyers in a very different perspective. So we would train lawyers as accumulating knowledge. We would accumulate knowledge in our students and then hand them over to the legal practice, and then they would practice all their lives based on that and on that accumulated knowledge. That's no longer the case because now technology is challenging that. So the knowledge, the database that was in the brains of a lawyer now is much more powerful in a computer. So that completely changes the way we should train lawyers right now and for the future. The future lawyer is not someone that is accumulating knowledge, but is someone that must have very specific skills to actually work with the knowledge that is accumulated in databases. Third, and I hope to be able to come back to this. Third is how do we reconcile all these challenges with ethics? Because there's a very important role of a lawyer anywhere, globally, which is to preserve justice and ethics behavior. So the lawyer everywhere is someone that collaborates with justice. And sometimes we have to tell our clients that's not a way to go, because that's not the correct way to go. So when you replace lawyers by technology, there's a huge challenge here. And one of the questions obviously is, what's the role for human beings? This morning we were listening to that. What's the role left for human beings in this technological revolution? And ethics is definitely a role that can never be replaced by a machine because it's part of the human judgment. So again, it's a skill we have to train more and more our students and our lawyers, which is to be an ethical, a professional, and someone that cares about the way we conduct the profession.
We are going to come back to technology in a moment, but I want to ask you, Almudena, as Secretary General of an organization that represents 100,000 lawyers in the world and all the global law firms in the world and many other type of law firms, you receive law graduates from law schools from all over the world. What is your vision from that perspective about the capacity of law schools to raise up to the challenges that we are describing?
That's right. Well, I very much agreed with what has already been said. What we perceive what is perceived generally at law firms, not only at my law firm, is that there is a mismatch on the skills that are increasingly being required from lawyers and the training that they get at university. There is, of course, the issue of technology that is growing in importance. So you need to understand the technology, and you need to also know how do you want to use that technology in order to take the best of it. Second, the value of knowing the law is now secondary because that's static, and because of globalization, technology, and the speed of changes, those laws are going to change. The essence of the law is going to remain, but the particular rules are going to be evolving. So basically, you need to train in having a very good mindset on the capacity of reasoning, in looking at a very complex legal environment because of this hyper-connected world. You just cannot look at the local system. The situations that are arising are more global. Just think of new financial instruments, or in terms of cybersecurity, privacy, etc. The solutions are global, so you need to have that global view, and we need lawyers to be trained in that matter. And of course, you need lawyers that may provide clients and may provide, I would say, more broadly, society with those other capacities that technology, that machines are not able to provide. And those are connected with the essential core values of human beings, the capacity of passion, of compassion, of course, a strong sense of ethics. At the end, there is a need of being able to react very quickly and with a sense of principle to some issues. The clients don't value the information. The value now is really on what is the addition that you are providing to that. The value of information now is zero. That is for the machines.
So we are going to get now into the intersection between law and technology. And I want, again, to be a bit provocative here. So we know that on the one hand, technology as a single biggest factor driving change in the legal industries, I think we can agree on that together with globalization, holds a lot of promise. Why is that? First of all, it promises to increase several times over the efficiency and effectiveness in the provision of legal services. And this can lead to the reduction of costs, the provision of legal costs, and also the reduction in costs may enable access to justice to many people that before didn't have access to the system. And we are seeing very innovative legal tech startups that are focusing on using technology to give access to legal information, access to public participation, access to the justice system through applications, mobile applications, for instance. Also, technology may allow law schools, especially those that are wealthy, to try out to develop new innovative methods of teaching that enable students to understand better law in context, in a global context. It also allows schools with less resources to have access instantaneously at a very low cost or for free to legal professors, law professors from all over the world, to get top content from other jurisdictions, that's enabling their students to study law from a comparative perspective, and so on and so forth. This is good, but on the other hand, technology may further drive the mercantilization of law. Let me give you an example. Very sophisticated global law firms employ very sophisticated lawyers that will work for very large technological corporations, intent of drafting mass agreements, if you want, adhesion agreements, that we sign very happily in order to get access to information in the web, for instance, or to participate in social networks without really understanding the implications of that. And those law firms know, and the technology companies know. We've heard before from Niall Ferguson about the global war on data, on the ownership on data, on the use of data to sell more products and more services. So, on the one hand, increased access to legal services, to education. On the other hand, clear risks that we are seeing very clearly at global level as well. What is your take, Almudena, on this?
Well, I think that technology indeed has a very positive, has a positive impact. But it, as always, it has to be played well. I mean, it is technology for us and not us for technology. So this means that in terms of legal education, you need to bring in the factor. You need to widen what is the focus that you are providing your students with. And if we go one step backwards, I was thinking as you were talking. I think that, of course, technology allows for the appearance of new service providers. The law can be available for a broader spectrum of people, but that is, let's say, if I can say it that way, a secondary law. I think that we have to consider again what is the importance of law, because there are now many agents providing alternative legal services, very much supported on technology, but at the end we have to think again on the relevance of the law. And this is connected with you were saying at the beginning, with the need of vocation. If we are able to realize that only with the law societies and people will continue developing, and that we need to do that globally so that there are no gaps because solutions will be global, that means that we need a new thinking by politicians, by all the stakeholders, by universities, by law firms in terms of the relevance of the law, because otherwise there is not going to be sufficient investment, the programs are not going to be modified. So I think that is a first thing, which is, I think, the counterbalance to the invasion of technology.
Great. That's very interesting, actually. Jorge, what do you think about what Almudena just said in the broader context of the pros and cons of technology?
I would put it that I agree in the sense that we have to rescue the value of the law, but let me perhaps switch the perspective now to the law school. That is, you're on the legal practices, right? But my business is to produce proficient, good lawyers, and at the end of the day, good citizens that would provide and will construct a better society through the law, right? But to get that, we need to be aware of the context. That is, how much disruptive technology will be within the next years. From the law school perspective, this means that you need to prepare your graduates at least for 3 different, I would say, tiers or levels of interacting with these disruptive changes. The first level will be merely to comprehend. That is, lawyers will need to have the capacity to provide regulation for future needs, for future contexts of technology. And in order for them to do that, they need to know the inner workings of technology. That is the same for mathematics or for biology or for physics. That is, lawyers need to know how things work at the technological level, right? The second level would be how to prevent or how to better prepare them for the substitution effect of the automatization process that will come to the profession. That is, for example, instead of thinking of preparing a lawyer for doing a due diligence in a merger and acquisition deal, perhaps we will need to train them into data mining and to how to better tune the vectors for e-discovery, right? So
you have to train in both.
And both, right. I mean, I'm not saying that you are not going to train them in due diligence. I'm saying that perhaps this is not the level of comprehending the technology, but using it, right? And the third level, which brings me back to the essence of law, would be to be, I would say, enablers of the social impact from an ethical perspective of technology, to produce legal, technologically oriented clinics, for example, where they can interact with data scientists and they can interact with IA scientists and produce technology that would enable a better access to justice, that will lower cost of the underprivileged in terms of access to justice. That is, to prepare them to know how technology can robust and make their communities more resilient to the changes that technology is producing. So I would say it's not a simplification to say that it's either go back to the course of law or to be aware of the pitfalls of technology. This is a bit more complex. We need as law schools to prepare them for a very uncertain future. And I would say this goes along these 3 steps that I've just proposed: comprehend, use, and to be an enabler of social resilience of technology in their communities.
Let me go to you, Gonzalo, but let me add a reflection on this very interesting exchange of ideas. So let's go to the global level. We have roughly 21,000 universities in the world, but we have many more law schools because some of them are not in universities. Only Mexico has more schools, Brazil has more than 1,000 law schools, India as well. How do we do this? Because this seems to be an important recipe to guarantee that lawyers do serve the legal system and to avoid law schools churning out law graduates that are unable to serve the legal system because they don't have the knowledge and the capacity to be successful in a highly complex, highly global economy. So let me ask you, what is your view about the gap between what is needed and what is now being provided generally? And is there a big gap also between different types of law schools? And what do you make of that gap?
Well, there I really see a crisis. So there I agree we have a crisis because law schools, legal education used to be a relatively inexpensive education, with the exception of the United States, where it is very expensive. In other places in the world, it's a relatively inexpensive education because it's seen to be a pencil and paper course. You just get a lawyer or a professor in front of a class and you teach. That's no longer the case. That completely changed because that kind of education will no longer fit the needs of the lawyer of the future. Legal education is much more complex these days, so it requires a great deal of technology and cutting-edge technology that only high-end law schools can acquire. So we cannot deal with that in low-end, in low-budget law schools. And also the kind of training that we provide in low-end law schools will be useless for the lawyer of the future. And in that sense, and coming back to what you said before, Javier, even in the United States, but certainly even more so in other jurisdictions, law students are feeling a bit deceived by law schools because they feel they were promised the world, they were promised magnificent jobs and access to the job market, and then they can't access it. It's certainly not their fault, but they were promised something that cannot be delivered because the world changed dramatically. So we have to understand, and here with the law schools we are involved with, but also the law firm, IBA, everyone involved in legal education, we have to understand that there was a complete shift in terms of legal education and in terms of what's required. For instance, we have to train our students globally. We cannot continue to train our students with a pen and pencil and a piece of paper just across the street. We need to send our students to the world, to have these exchange programs, to be trained overseas, to have intensive exposure to technology, to high-end technology. So that requires, obviously, a much more demanding legal education.
Yes.
So again, I think very interesting reflections, and let me press on that one. We have said that legal systems are becoming so intertwined that we start to see something that resembles to some extent a global legal system. And we can put quote marks there, but kind of global legal system in which all the jurisdictions are deeply intertwined. But then we see that the main providers of legal education are law schools, and they are very different. Not all of them are equal, and there are many. And obviously the schools that in principle one would think have the capacity to adapt to these complex times, to provide technological resources, are those in the most developed countries, whereas law schools in other developing countries cannot do it. So we might see a bias between the law graduates from very rich countries that will dominate global economy and lawyers that should be serving other countries do not just have access, or if they have access to wealthy law schools in wealthy countries, they will not come back. So this can create a lack of equilibrium, a fragmentation of the global legal system that should serve a global legal economy. And that can generate many problems. So I'm coming back to one issue you mentioned, Gonzalo, and I think this is the final issue we want to discuss and reflect carefully here. What needs to happen, in your view, to make sure that legal education improves to address these challenges, and that's so at a global level at more or less the same path, so that we don't see enormous differences in the quality of those that should be protecting the legal system? And here we don't talk only about lawyers, we talk about legislators, we talk about judges, we talk about policymakers, many of which are lawyers. So what kind of coalition, what kind of pact, what kind of strategy could we follow to achieve this, thinking in the thousands of schools that are out there? Almudena.
Quite a challenge, but a very relevant one. And I think that point one, I go back to my comment on assuming the relevance of law and the relevance of training in law if you want to have healthy societies. So this has to be a global project, because if there are gaps in different jurisdictions, at the end of the day you will find human resources in some areas which are not utilized, and that may create unbalances and unfair situations. So first, awareness of the relevance of law. Second, using those institutions like the Law Schools Global League, like the IBA, International Bar Association, that can really have a global view. And for example, we have started a project jointly with the Law School Global League and also with the IE. This is a wonderful project, and it is really interesting, because what we want to produce is a blueprint on the model of the legal education globally. And for that purpose, we are studying what are the challenges and what is the way to respond to them. Going region by region, we will get the input for more than 420 law schools and universities in each jurisdiction, draw what is the common line, and then have an overall view that can be applied globally, and practical examples on how to implement that new model, that blueprint of legal education. That would be a first stage, because of course you have the model, and then you need to get that into practice. You have to walk the talk. And in order to do that, I think that we need to involve the different stakeholders that have a role to say in the legal profession. Of course, we need to involve the politicians, we need to involve the judiciary, we need to involve the academia, of course, we need to involve the law firms, and only in that manner I think that it will be possible that if there is awareness of the importance of this subject, there will be a sufficient interest and resources and practical means to put these down to earth.
Thanks a lot, Almudena, for that. And I want to use that reflection to test a little bit, and let me be provocative again, the practicality, the applicability of this kind of global solution. You are deans of law schools in different jurisdictions. What do you think are the challenges here to actually come up with a global blueprint that can really inspire change and make that change possible?
Right. I think that the challenges are, I would say, in two different directions, but they are self-reinforcement challenges. The first is to, even if you have a coalition, a global coalition, you need to identify very well who is going to be the interpreters and the enablers of the use of the technology that work and travel well across jurisdictions. Let me give you one example. If you look at how mature the e-discovery technology is in the US for e-discovery, one of the things that's been preventing the use of that technology in other jurisdictions is the erratic way of the production of public data in other jurisdictions. It is merely how courts quote each other. If you don't have a good data public access to public information, that technology will not work well in other jurisdictions. So you need to be careful about who is going to be the interpreter and the enabler of technologies across jurisdictions. Not because of the technology, but because of institutional set barriers. And the second dimension that I think is problematic is the idea of producing good examples that will work as benchmarks. You can, for example, say that you need to use whiteboards in classroom instead of the Socratic method. But people oftentimes will take that example and translate it in a very unsophisticated way. That is, you need to produce as a public good in this coalition good examples as to how to benchmark what counts as a successful implementation of each technology within the law education, right? But this goes both ways. If you have a good enabler of the technology that takes into consideration different institutional barriers, then you need to produce a global repository of good examples that will work as benchmarks, right? So I think the two most difficult things to overcome would be how can we identify the good interpreters and enablers of global technology for multiple jurisdictions and good examples as benchmarks.
Yeah.
Right?
That creates many challenges. I can think of two immediately. Language barriers, of course, the legal system regulating access to that data and dissemination of the data, but also, and as important, resources.
Yeah.
The amount of resources you need to dedicate to creating, in the first place, these data sets and the technology that can make use of it in a smart way are, it seems to me, quite large. So this comes back to the kind of coalition that has to be created. How do you see, Gonzalo, that happening, the very real risk that what is urgently needed cannot be achieved in many jurisdictions because of lack of sheer resources?
Well, I think there are two ways of doing that, and these two ways must probably be combined. One is that leading law schools in the world these days are becoming global schools, global law schools, in the sense that they are not only training lawyers locally, but they are training lawyers for the world. So they have an increasingly international crowd, and lawyers from around the world come and attend classes there. So that's a fundamental mission of leading global schools, to train lawyers from all over the world and to disseminate the word and disseminate the knowledge. So I think that's an important part of our institutions, which is to train lawyers of other countries, and they can go back and disseminate that knowledge. But at the same time, obviously that's not enough. So leading law schools have another responsibility, which is to create or to help enhance local institutions that can replicate that model. And that's where the Law Schools Global League came in, and the project we have with IBA, which is actually to gather schools from all over the world, engage them in these projects, raise awareness of the importance of these topics, also by benchmarking, by comparing practices and having this blueprint that will show by data what's going on and what's necessary for law schools. And then by raising awareness, hopefully it will raise the bar, and we will have a set of institutions globally that understand the importance of changing legal education.
Can you already see some seeds of this change? Do you see areas in specific institutions that are already walking in that direction, that are finding coalitions, that are finding ways beyond what we have just discussed?
No, definitely. And I mean, if we look at the Law Schools Global League, for instance, and the project we are running with hundreds of schools globally, the Law Schools Global League now has members across the 5 continents. Very relevant schools in Africa, for instance, in Latin America, in Asia. So we have a number of schools that are now playing the leading role in their own jurisdictions. Well, ITAM is definitely an example of that, IE, Católica, and many others that are playing regionally this important role and will definitely be drivers of change in their regions.
Well, I would love to keep going for a good while. It was such a pleasure, but I think we ran out of time. So I want to thank you a lot for this engaging debate, and to the audience for staying with us and learning a little bit more about the challenges we grapple with as deans or as representatives of large global associations. Thank you so much to all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gonzalo Matías, thank you. Jorge Celio Almudena Arpón de Mendívil y Javier de Cendra. Thank you so much. Go ahead, band. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, what are we going? Tears when the rain came down in the hollow, leaning in again, laughing and running, hey, hey, skipping on its own bed in the mess.
band made of entrepreneurs. I'm very excited to introduce our last keynote speaker of this morning. Those of you who have stayed, well done. Those of you who are arriving, you know who he is, because he's an amazing, amazing person and professional. I'm very honored to introduce him, not only because he's a top person in the, speaker. Also, I introduced him a year ago in Madrid, and I was totally carried away, blown away by his presentations, despite being a computer engineer, computing and electrical engineer. He's such a good communicator. It's worth every single word. First of all, because we'll understand everything he says. So it's a pleasure to introduce him in stage. Since last year when I met him, his career has gained a new milestone. He's now the global director of IBM Research, where he has been working for the past 16 years in various areas, going from nanotechnology to IE, or EI, and quantum computing, the easy subjects. He is only the 12th person and the youngest, you will see in a minute, to hold this position in the 74 years of history of IBM Research. And he's now in charge of over 3,000 researchers in 19 areas located around 6 continents. It's a big team. Under his leadership in 2016, IBM managed to create, and it was the first company to create the first programmable quantum computers, and make them accessible through the cloud. I was asking him, how does it work? You can actually write a code and connect to a quantum computer in the States that will send whatever the answer back. Is this right? We're going okay? So this is amazing, quantum computers in the cloud. He doesn't believe, though, in the Terminator effect. Do you know the Terminator effect? Juan José Güemes, venga, que le veo hablando mucho. Venga, que está muy despistado. The Terminator effect. What is it? Robots will take over the world. Don't worry, you can relax. He says this is not going to happen. But he doesn't believe either that robots will make our life so easy that we can just relax at the beach and let them work. So don't relax too much, okay? What he believes is that, and I have written it down, that technology will progress, but not only thanks to the machines that we will create, but thanks to the answers and the way we respond as a society. And he's here to tell us about the future of computing. So please, a big round of applause for Dr. Darío Gil.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Bueno, lo primero, buenos días. Y es un placer estar aquí en Madrid de nuevo. This is where I work. It's about an hour north of New York City. And it's a beautiful building that was designed by Eero Saarinen, a very famous Finnish architect that we opened in 1961. And in the building alone, we have about 1,500 scientists. And it's my home and where I love to work every day. And it's part of a global network of laboratories where we have in total about 3,000 scientists. And what binds us in common is that we're all really, really passionate about inventing the future of computing. And I would like to be able to share a perspective of what that is going to be and some of the implications that it will have for society. But let me begin with this quote from John Maynard Keynes, that on the power of ideas, and it's this great quote, he says, "Practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influence are usually the slaves of some defunct economist." And I'm going to do an update for the 21st century, where I'm going to argue that a variation of this is that the ideas of scientists and technologies, particularly working in this world of information and computation, are also going to have these enormous implications for society. And I want to hone in today around 3 particular world-changing ideas and how the intersection of those ideas are going to indeed create a very radically form of computing. So I'd like to talk about the ideas of bits and the consequences of them, the idea of neurons through Santiago Ramón y Cajal, and the idea of qubits. And simply put, I firmly believe that we're in the most exciting time in computing that we've had in the last 50 years. And that the future of computing will be based on this combination of bits plus neurons plus qubits coming together. But let's summarize very quickly what the last 50 or 60 years of computing have been about. To understand what has happened, we really have to go to what Claude Shannon taught us. When he formulated what is now known as classical information theory, he told us to think about this world of information abstractly, almost like Plato, right? This world of ideas, and he introduced this term called the binary digit. And he said, think about these bits in this way, and decouple the way you think about bits completely from their physical manifestation or implementation. It doesn't matter over time that we had vacuum tubes and transistors and so on, or that the way we communicate them change, right, from telegraphs to optical fiber or wireless. We can have a conceptual idea of these zeros and ones and manipulate them in that fashion. So he separated physics and information. We're going to see later whether that assumption is true or not. But for now, that is the edifice from which we build the modern digital world. It's what allowed us to look at objects as different as these two, a punch card and DNA. And in the past, we would have looked at them and said, they have nothing in common. Now, of course, thanks to Shannon's ideas, we can look at them and say, yeah, they have something in common. They're both carriers of information. It's a way of looking at them and understanding what they do through a new lens with which to look at the world. Now, there was a companion idea that was not theoretical in nature, but has really produced the modern computing world, and that was Moore's law. This is the recreation of the original plot of Gordon Moore. You see what he plotted there is in 1962, started for just 4 years. He had this observation, which was empirical in nature, that the number of transistors per unit area was doubling roughly every 18 months. And he made this projection. He says, that may continue. And amazingly enough, for the last 50 years, we've kept pace with that doubling and doubling and doubling. The result of it is that the technology is incredibly sophisticated and mature. In the latest generation of or Z systems that we announced a few weeks ago, you can have a microprocessor that has 9 billion transistors, where each transistor is a third to a fourth the size of a human virus, and they all work. You can put them into systems that can have 5 or 6 nines of reliability. And you can deploy them, and that's what allows us to process trillions of transactions a year. We've also seen that you can scale out these systems. This is an example of a system we designed and built for the Department of Energy in the United States that we delivered last year. It's the #1 supercomputer in the world. And it's capable of performing 200,000 trillion calculations per second. Every once in a while, it's useful to step back and look at the numbers, right? It's just an incredible achievement of what is possible today with this maturity of bits. We, of course, know that it's not just the story of high-performance systems. All of us have access to these computers and through our cell phones and the amazing computational power. And that has given to a different component of it, which is the emergence of digital communities that can now create at a speed that we could not do. This is an example of just 9 days of commits, software commits, for folks who are interested in accelerating the development of Linux as an operating system. And this is having very profound implications because the breadth and depth of digital sophistication. Okay. There's about 36 million digital developers, software developers around the world that can do this. So the first thing is, what I'm going to argue is that clearly the maturity of bits-based technology is incredible. is very diffuse, and is presenting a set of opportunities and challenges. But I'm going to, in a minute, make the argument that this is not the whole story of what is going on. However, the opportunity from a sort of cultural implications and skills implication is for all our institutions, how do we inspire the millions of people, the millions of people who are capable of digital creation to innovate on our behalf, to really go and expand, and extend the boundary of the innovation that we could do within our own companies, tapping into this community. The answer to how to do that well is related to the world of agile and the world of open communities. And knowing how to navigate those worlds is essential to tap into that vector of innovation that happens outside. However, there's also a downside of it. And when Professor Ferguson was talking before in his remarks, he highlighted the challenges of these network communities. And how will we have governance over them? And to the extent that we're going to impose some level of rule-making on top to drive governance, how do we do it with a level of agility? How do we invent agile policy making that is adaptive to the reality of what we experience in these communities? These are also open challenges. But let me now move forward in the analysis. One question we could ask ourselves, is the future just like the past? Is the future just about taking bits and making them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and scaling them out? Is the future just digital? I'm going to say that's not going to be the only answer. It's a fundamental part of the answer, but there's two additional components that are going to come into play that are going to be the edifice of modern computing. And for this, we have to introduce a new discipline. Shannon is the one that brought together mathematics and information. But now we're going to bring biology and information. And to understand that, we got to go back to Santiago Ramón y Cajal. At the turn of the 20th century, he was among the very first to understand that in our brain we have these cell structures called neurons. And that neurons have these long tails called axons, and that the intersection of axons form synapses. And that these synapses are deeply connected to memory and learning. As hopefully you all know, Ramón y Cajal was also a wonderful illustrator. And you can see some of the diagrams that he would hand draw from his observations from the microscope. And there's been a wonderful collection, actually, of some of his diagrams that has been circulated around museums, and a recent collection on a book that I really recommend that you all buy and look into. Well, it turns out that without any more than this biological inspiration, starting in the 1940s and 50s, mathematicians created an abstraction. They took that idea of neural networks and they added something in front of it, an artificial neural network. And we began to see diagrams like this, where each blue dot represents a neuron. Neurons are organized in layers. So when we say a neural network, all we mean is this layered approach. That the connection between neurons, depicted here in the white lines, are the synapses. And that all that this structure does, each blue dot, all that it does, it either fires or it doesn't fire. It activates or it doesn't. And when we say that we train a neural network, or that artificial intelligence learns, all we mean is that we're learning the strength of the connection of the white lines. Should there be a connection between blue dots? And if there's a connection between blue dots, how strong should it be? Well, it's a very kind of like, general idea, and you say, what does it do for you? I would like to bring here the idea of different ways of representing knowledge and what knowledge means. I'm going to connect back to why this neural idea is so powerful. Let's say we want to understand what is an apple. There are different ways to describe what is an apple. In the bottom one is a way to describe it with words. We can say an apple has a structure. The structure is that it has a body and a stem, that the body of the apple has a shape, and that the shape is round. And you can imagine going through the tree and describe this object by writing down some of the key attributes of the apple. The neural network approach is to say, forget that. Don't do it that way. What we're going to do is we're going to learn what an apple is through the strength of the connections of those white lines. And if I do it properly, in the end, there'll be a neuron that only fires if it sees an apple. And if it doesn't see an apple, it doesn't fire. It's a different way of representing knowledge that is embedded in the strength of the connections of the neural network. And the different methodological approach is you teach machines to learn by example. Think of the contrast of writing a program in the way of the bottom, where you have to sit down, and let's say we're talking about a cat, and you have to have this philosophical reflection of what is a cat. And let's say you're building an image recognition system of it. You say, oh, let's write a rule. It has 2 ears and 4 legs. Great. And then someone says, what happens if an ear is missing? Is it still a cat? You say, yeah, it's still a cat. So you have to write a different rule. And you can imagine the difficulty of that. You write more and more rules. In this neural approach, you don't do that. You learn by example. Very, very fundamental idea. Anyway, that idea was a good idea, but it didn't work very well. And then it began to work in 2012. Why? Because of the bits story. It turned out that you need to give it lots of examples. Not 10, not 100. You need to give it tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of examples. Sometimes millions of examples. And prior to digitizing the world, we simply did not have enough examples to train the machine. The second thing you needed is you needed enough computing power to be able to iterate through this example to learn the strength of those white lines. And we had to wait until we had powerful enough computers. Well, those 3 things intersected. And if you see on the right-hand side, it's a plot of the best computer vision scientists in the world trying to write algorithms to be able to determine what was in an image. Notice that the error rate with which the best computer scientists in the world could perform was as high as 30%, just a decade ago. And what happened in that year was the largest improvement in the history of the field, and you can see what has happened ever since compared to human performance. This idea of neural networks is the reason behind why everybody's so excited about AI now. It is the reason behind why language translation and speech transcription and language processing and visual recognition has gotten better. Students, who are very sophisticated barometers of the future, have detected this as well. And a decade ago, if you were at MIT as an example, the number of students who may be enrolled in a machine learning class maybe were on the order of 20 people, 30 people. It was not a hot field. Now there's over 1,000 students enrolled both at Stanford and MIT taking machine learning as a foundational vehicle with which to look at the world. Having said all of that, it is unfortunate that we've ended up in the field with the term AI. AI, for most people, is a scary term. Furthermore, AI is a non-clarifying term. When we hear public debates, when Elon Musk is talking to Mark Zuckerberg, and one is saying this is going to be the end of the world or a utopia, and then you have Mark Zuckerberg saying actually it's quite useful to have AI because I can label images in a social feed, they're talking about different things. So one of the things we have learned is a useful suggestion to all of you is add an adjective in front of the word AI. Are we talking about narrow AI, the kind of AI we have today? Or are we talking about general AI, the kind of AI that would not only mimic, but would surpass human intelligence? I'll tell you right away that general AI is many, many decades away. When you poll like scientists like us who are working in the field, they say things like, oh, 2050 and beyond. But I like to joke that when we scientists say things like 2050, what we really mean is we have no idea of when this is going to happen. So what we're seeing here is that we do have something in the bag. We do have something that has intrinsic value. And there's no turning back the fact that neural-based architectures are going to be a permanent part of the landscape of computing. And what we have in the back is that we know that for single tasks in single domains, let's say the ability to detect melanoma, let's say, if it's cancer or not cancer. If I have enough images with enough labels, I can assure you we can build a model that outperforms any rule-based system and likely has superhuman accuracy. But you have all those constraints. You need large amounts of labeled data and enough compute and a narrow focus. The next step in AI is going to be to extend AI's capabilities so that you can do multiple tasks across multiple domains with many kinds of signals, not just images, but time series, right? And language, and blending them all together. That's very, very important. And remember this word around neurosymbolic AI, the blend of the two grand intellectual traditions in AI, the neural lens and the lens of knowledge representation and logic. Simply put, learning alone cannot be the paradigm to solve all the problems of AI. It will be a combination of learning and reasoning and knowledge representation coming together, expressed in this path of neurosymbolic AI. Just to give you a little bit of a flavor for where the boundaries are in AI, there's been a long-running tradition in the field to use games as a way to test what the limits of computation are. They did that to the very beginning of the field. The term itself, AI, was coined in 1956. And as early as 1959, you see there Arthur Samuel, who was an IBMer, he's the one that coined the term machine learning. And as early as then, he already built a machine learning program to learn how to play checkers. And we've seen ever since, like in '92, Jerry Tesoro demonstrated already that just from pixels, using reinforcement learning, you could learn how to play the game. A precursor of what we've seen more recently, for example, with the AlphaGo demonstrations, but with more computing power. We've seen it applied to chess and to Jeopardy. Now, a few years back, when we were thinking about what are other demonstrations, we decided that it might be very interesting to step out of the realm of games. And the idea was that if AI is going to fulfill its full potential, it's going to have to live in the messy world of humans. And we thought that the world of debate would be an interesting proxy for that complexity. It's not so clear that who is the winner and loser, but what really matters is the ability to put forth complicated arguments and to go back and forth and to use a combination of both data and information, but also persuasion. So earlier this year, we showed in San Francisco the first machine called Project Debater that can engage with a human in a full live debate. So given just one sentence, the topic to debate, the machine has to automatically generate on the fly a 4-minute opening speech. The human delivers their 4-minute opening speech. The machine has to listen for those 4 minutes, automatically create a 4-minute rebuttal. The human does a 4-minute rebuttal, and then there's 2 minutes of closing arguments on each side. From just one sentence, 10 minutes of essentially essay writing, including rebuttal from what they've heard. So I'm just going to show you, the whole thing is online, you should watch it. Just a 2-minute clip of some of the back and forth that took place. And the topic that was being debated is whether preschools should be subsidized by the government, right? And one side debated in favor or against it. And it was against a European debate champion that had been educated at Oxford. So let me just play you a few. Can we get the sound up?
Welcome to the future. For decades, research has demonstrated that high-quality preschool is one of the best investments of public dollars. Regarding poverty, research clearly shows that a good preschool can help kids overcome the disadvantages often associated with poverty. The OECD has recommended that government subsidize pre-primary education to boost performance in poorer areas.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here for this historic event. And it certainly was a pleasure to listen to Project Debater. In a competitive environment at the age of 3 or 4, when you're learning that that other child is potentially better than you, when you realize you aren't necessarily as talented as someone else, that huge psychological damage for many children may mean that preschool is actively harmful.
My opponent claimed that preschools are harmful. I believe my argument suggested that the benefits outweigh the potential disadvantages. I touched upon 3 issues: children, students, and crime. Specifically, I noted that preschool education improves children's development. In addition, I suggested that attending preschool helps students succeed. And a final point to consider is that preschool can prevent future crime. We should subsidize preschools. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. So I recommend watching the whole thing because you can see it's a 40-minute debate back and forth. This is just a clip, but it's really, really fascinating to also see what the strengths and the weaknesses are of both the system and the humans. Having said all of that, let me offer a second suggestion on ways to think about AI. I suggested to add an adjective, talk about narrow, broad, or general as a way to understand. But the second suggestion is, before we talk about general AI, in this world that we live in right now and the coming decades, think of AI as software. Instead of making it this mystical thing that has unique properties and attributes that acts on its own, when we use the term software, we don't do that. We attribute software to who created it. We attribute the responsibility of whether you wrote good software or not to the institution that made it happen. We have software engineering practices to make sure that we build good software. And if you build crappy software, it's your fault. It's not AI's fault. It's your fault for writing bad software. But a second implication of this, not to minimize the importance, when we think about where will AI be, AI will be wherever there is software. We have all gotten accustomed to using software in every aspect of our life, but I assure you that there's something fundamental about the methodological approach to represent knowledge and represent data driven by these neural approaches that is a permanent part of computing. So, the opportunity that we have in this world of AI is that the technologies that we created to extend what our bodies could do through the Industrial Revolution really fundamentally transformed the world. But when we talk about the possibilities to now enhance the capabilities of our beautiful minds, it can be equally transformative. But let's not minimize the challenge of what this transition is like. Revolutions radically alter the social fabric and economic fabric of society. So there's peril in this transition. And I really firmly believe that we should not be technological determinists. I don't believe in a technology or in a politics that's either utopia or dystopia. And I think we're going to be sophisticated enough to be able to govern in a very human-centric way what technology can do for us. So now let me touch the final part of the foundation of what the future of computing is going to be, which is the world of qubits. So I mentioned that mathematics and information gave us bits, biology and information gave us neurons, and now we're going to bring a third discipline, physics and information, coming together, bringing us qubits. For us, the story in IBM research started with Rolf Landauer, an extraordinary physicist and IBM fellow who was very interested in this relationship between physics and information, and he hired at the time Charlie Bennett. That's a picture of Charlie now, not then when he hired him. And Charlie is one of the fathers of quantum information theory. And they were physicists, and they would ask themselves questions like this. They would say, is there a fundamental limit to how energy efficient computing can be? They would ask questions like, is information processing thermodynamically reversible? Only the kinds of questions that physicists would ask, right, looking at the world of information. And pulling down that thread, they discovered that the bit is not the fundamental unit of computation, but rather something known as the qubit, short for quantum bit. And what they, down the road, the community discovered is that you can actually represent information more richly than these two states. And there were three specific principles from physics that came into the world of information. One was the idea of superposition. The second one was the idea of entanglement. And the third was the idea of interference. I'm not going to go into a sort of like physics discussion around that, but I want you to bring the idea of physics now representing information very, very differently. And let me give you an example of the second property of entanglement that I won't describe right now, and the relationship that this property has compared to the world of information. If I have a machine that has these special qubits as opposed to bits, and I entangle them, this property that I'm not describing, with one another, and I try to represent the complexity of that new machine using just bits, I need an exponential number of them. To be very precise, when I have 100 qubits that are entangled, if I needed to describe that new machine with bits, I would need every atom of planet Earth to store zeros and ones. By the time I have a machine with 280 qubits, I would need every atom of the known universe to store zeros and ones to just represent what that quantum computer states has available. That's an interesting property. So why does this matter at all? Can computers solve every problem? No, they cannot. Classical computers cannot. So if you look at actually from a complexity theory perspective, all that classical computers can solve is what's known as easy problems. Things in which the number of variables don't grow exponentially. And you would ask, well, are there problems such as that in the world? It turns out there are many, many problems of the world that have that property that they grow exponentially. Among them, the ability to simulate nature, the ability to model or create a new material. Let's say you want to invent a new battery. The ability to do that calculation is exponential with the number of electrons that are present. Are there other problems? Well, factoring is a good example. Modern encryption, of all the encryption we use, relies on the fact that it's hard for computers to factor large numbers. Well, I just gave you two examples. It turns out that quantum computers are the only technology we know that would alter the equation of things that are impossible to do versus possible. I'm not claiming that quantum computers will solve all impossible problems. I'm saying that there's a very important subset of very, very important problems that quantum computers are the only technology we know that can alter the equation of what's possible. So can you build them? We find ourselves in a similar moment to this. This is 1944, the first programmable digital computer that was built in Bletchley Park in the UK, the precursor of all the computers we all enjoy. Well, we have now built the first programmable quantum computers. The ones we built at IBM look like this. They're based on superconducting technology, and they work at these cryogenic temperatures, about 15 millikelvin. So it's actually at the very bottom of it, where the quantum processor lives, is one of the coldest places in the universe. So that's really interesting. Now, we built this technology, and in 2016, we were the first company in the world to build a quantum computer that had 5 qubits, and we made it universally accessible through the cloud. And this is basically what happens. You sit on any computer or terminal, you write your quantum program, you send it, and you take these zeros and ones coming out of your program, and when it gets to the quantum hardware that we have, we convert it to these microwave pulses that operate at about 5 gigahertz. The pulses go all the way down this cryostat until we get to these cryogenic temperatures, and those qubits, we perform these interference and entanglement operations that I told you about. So we do all those quantum mechanical operations with the qubits, then we get the signals out, we convert them back to zeros and ones, and we give you the answer to the program you have run. So this is what happened when we created this community. So a new community of quantum programmers is emerging. These are the users around the world accessing the IBM quantum computers that we have deployed. At present, we have over 150,000 registered users that have run over 20 million computer programs running on quantum now. We have now 10 deployed quantum computers supporting this community. And by the end of this month, we will have 14, including a 53-qubit machine that we announced just a couple of weeks back. The availability of this machine is over 95% now, right, of these systems. It's amazing the amount of progress that has happened, and we have over 80 commercial partnerships engaging with us on this. So there's a new Moore's law going on. There's a metric called quantum volume that describes the power of a quantum computer. The power of a quantum computer, don't get misled, it's not just qubits. Having more qubits, if you don't lower the error of those qubits, buys you nothing. So the combination of both the number of qubits and the error rate is this quantum volume, and we've demonstrated now experimentally that we're doubling quantum volume every year. We went from 4 to 8 to 16. If we keep that pace, really spectacular results are going to result of getting to this era of quantum advantage in the 2020s. So the opportunity here is that quantum advantage, the exploitation of quantum computers for scientific and commercial advantage, is really coming for those that have this culture of discovery, of thinking differently about what are the possibilities. You gotta think anew. We didn't even leave the bit as sacred. Everything is new in this new world of quantum on how you write algorithms and think. But it requires stretching the thinking. The best quantum programmers probably are not born yet, right? So it's going to be a different approach. So bits, neurons, and qubits coming together to accelerate the rate of scientific discovery and to imagine a new generation of mission-critical applications. So I'd like to close with a final reflection on the amount of progress and some of the implications. First is this statement: don't think that the future is just digital. In fact, this world of neurons is an analog world, and qubits are an interesting combination of digital and analog coming together. That is almost a microcosm of the reality that we as analog beings are also going to interface with these computers. So think analog with digital coming together in new ways. 2, the implications of technology is so important that it cannot just be left to the technologists. And that's why I think events like these are so important to have this multidisciplinary approach. We need new policies and politics that are neither utopian nor dystopian in nature of how we will govern science and technology. And for all of us in the technology community, we need a very human-centric approach to technology development based on human rights and shared prosperity for all. But if you're scared about progress of technology, just remember one final thought. We have not run out of problems to solve in the world. And the reality of it is that we could use the help. Thank you.
Thank you, Darío. No, Darío, come with me here to the center. I just want to say thank you so much to Darío. We're going to go for lunch, so this is the final panel for the morning, but that was extremely interesting. We learned a lot of things, haven't we? Now IE has a first name, either narrow, broad, or general. Yes. But the most important thing we've learned, the most, is that when you scientists talk about 2050, you have no idea.
That's true.
Thank you so much, Darío Gil. We'll see you here after lunch.